Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rappler Talk. And today I want you to meet somebody who I think epitomizes what democracy is, Ken Abante. I first met him in 2014, actually before that, but in 2014 through 2017, he was in the finance department and he worked on the budgets from 2014 to 2017. He worked closely with the people we know today, and then at this, after that, he decided to go to Harvard for the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and now is back as a researcher at the Ateneo de Manila. Ken, sorry, long preamble, but it's good to talk to you.
Great to talk to you too, Maria.
The best part is when he came back and the pandemic happened, he is civic engagement at work. And their findings have been giving us weekly reports. So can you give us an idea now of where we are in terms of the findings, your most recent findings?
Sure, Maria. I'll share my screen now. So I just wanted to give you a quick recap of our key findings. So the first question that we want to ask is, do we have enough cash? And our answer there is for now, yes, but we need to make sure we don't run out. So we work with auditors and financial reporting experts to figure out that government has actually announced around 1 trillion pesos in cash sources. And we've categorized this according to 3 different columns. So 567 billion is confirmed and in the treasury. 111 billion pesos is confirmed but not yet in the treasury, and 342 billion we're not sure. So we're tracking that. You can see that in our tracker. And 100 billion has been certified by the treasury for the social amelioration program. What we think we need to watch out for are new loans, new dividend collections, and the status of local government finances. What we're seeing now is so much of the responsibility is now devolved into local governments, but we do not have an idea of what the cash status of our local governments are, and we need to make sure we support them. The second question, and this is quite confusing actually, so what is the size of the budget? So far, we've been able to figure out that there is a regional breakdown of around a maximum of 275 billion pesos for around 17.9 million households. So this does not include yet the newly announced 51 billion pesos for the wage subsidy because it will be implemented in May. But the president has the emergency powers to make this much larger. And we think, we still continue to see this being asked by the public. We think we should stop talking about the 275 billion actually, because that number has already been overtaken by events. And the third is we recommend a clear accounting of the 1.45 trillion pesos for the announced 4-pillar coronavirus economic strategy. We have a detailed breakdown in our report about what items we think are sources of financing that are mixed with expenditures, and what we think this accounting needs to be sorted out better, although the Department of Finance has clarified some of these reports recently. There. That's for our major 2 questions. And the third question, which I think many people want to understand, is, are we spending fast enough? And our quick answer to that is no. So more than a month into the enhanced community quarantine, only 5.2 million of the 17.9 million households, or 29%, for social amelioration have been served. Only 31 billion pesos of this 217 billion peso budget for social amelioration, or 14%, has been spent. And we're still studying this, so we're not quite sure whether this is too slow or too fast. I'm not sure. But 8.3 billion pesos of the 39.6 billion peso reported health budget, or around a fifth of the budget, has been spent. So we're studying this. And in fact, part of the contents of our report, and our report is actually entitled Spend Faster to Stop Hunger, because we don't think cash is the constraint. We don't think the authorities in the budget are the constraint, because the Bayanihan Act gives the president a lot of leeway to actually reallocate budgets into the COVID-19 response. But really the question is 3. Are we spending fast enough? And this is where I think civic engagement can play a big role in working with our local government so we can spend faster to stop hunger.
That's correct. So Ken, at this point, can you give us an idea of how you actually pulled this report together? How are you able to do this on a weekly basis?
So we actually started uh, in uh, in April, like the first day of April, first, and in fact, during that time, I was driven by frustration, really, and anger, because many of my cousins and aunts are frontliners here in the province. So I come from Bicol, and I had just heard from them the week before that they were running out of protective equipment. And I thought, I think it's important for everyone to keep track of where the government and help the government actually uh, keep track of where the budget goes and make sure it goes to the right places and protecting our frontliners. And they're my family members, so I really have a stake here. So when we released the version 0 of the tracker and the report, so many people wanted to help. So right now, actually, we've gotten around 50 plus volunteers to help us here. So people from finance now helping design a site so that this can be more easily understandable to the public. People who give us budget advice, social welfare advice, people who do dashboards, and really the outpouring of support is really amazing. And I feel that while this coronavirus pandemic has definitely shown everything that's wrong with the current system, the weaknesses of our health system and delivery, it has also highlighted the generosity of the people who really care. And I do think that if yesterday I was driven by anger and frustration, today I'm driven by hope, and I feel that, and it's really an honor to be able to present the work that our 50 plus volunteers have worked hard to do.
This is what I love about that is that in many ways the work that you're doing shows exactly the Bayanihan spirit, which is the euphemistic name of our emergency powers law. 14%, only 14% of the budget spent from the years that you worked on the budget. What are the normal reasons during these states of disaster? And we've had them, right? We have NDRRMC that had an entire workflow in place to deal with disasters. Why only 14% when we're walking into week 7 of a lockdown?
Yeah. And I think this is where actually the coronavirus pandemic is unique, right? Because if it was already difficult before to disburse funds, while people were still in the office, now people are in physical distancing, and we have to also, I think, expand our empathy for the government workers who are frontliners here. And we ask the question, do they have the protective equipment to actually disburse the funds? Do these local government officers and barangay workers actually get hazard pay? And do they get limited exposure to the virus? That part we're not sure. So I guess coming from government, I also have that sympathy or that empathy for government workers who are trying to deal with this pandemic, and I think that's part of it. Certainly, another set of issues are in the regulatory controls. So there are things that the Commission on Audit requires for minimum documentation. We are not sure whether there's some fear that if they do disburse the funds quickly and they don't get the right documents, that COA will come after them and get their jobs. And that's a very, very important element to this. Like that regulatory controls have to be clear. There's another set from the National Privacy Commission
Yes.
that actually is in some of the memorandum of agreement documents that local government officials sign. While we recommend that they should pay now, verify later, right? And not require IDs because it excludes so many people from the process, like 5 to 7.5 million Filipinos who don't have birth certificates and who likely don't have valid IDs. We think this also sends some degree of a hesitation coming from social welfare and local government employees, even if under Section 4C and 4E of the Privacy Act, the beneficiary lists from these social welfare programs are actually excluded from the law and from the mandate. So that those are that's the second issue. The third issue is we need to also consider the ability to disburse actual physical cash. So I was asking my dad about this actually, and it's very hard actually to withdraw the cash and put the cash in envelopes and give it to households. And then before that, you actually have to plan for the list of households, and you have to plan for the deduplication, because that's also a major bottleneck. They're like local government officials are afraid that if they duplicate, they have to pay back, and COA might go after them. So all these things I think contribute to the slow disbursement. But these are actionable items actually and we've sent some of our recommendations to both the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee and the Social Welfare Department.
It's so fitting that you have a clock behind you, because this is a race against time, right? I mean, that's really what we're trying to do. I just was watching Anthony Fauci last night, and he said, look, right now the lockdown keeps the virus away from us to buy us time for our public health care system, right? So the problem here now is, in this race against time, from what you know of the way budgets work, you outlined all of the details of the fears of the of the people who have to deal with it, right? But aren't there existing quick disbursements during emergencies, during disasters? Aren't there existing workflows that could be tapped to deal with this, or this is just completely new?
So that's actually part of the things we want to study, really. So we're not sure, and like I admit I don't know whether these existing, like to what extent these current NDRRMC systems are being used.
Right.
So for example,
we both know NDRRMC, right? I mean, Rappler worked very closely with NDRRMC.
Yeah, and we worked with them in Yolanda. I had the experience of building a repacking operation in 2013 in Cargo House Naiya. So we had like 36-hour work days there. It was tough. But if you again contrasting those two experiences, like Yolanda was terrible, and there was so much suffering there. But the scale of this pandemic really is a different story. So I'm also like I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure how to answer the question.
No, I think it's a question we're all asking. And, one of the things I like about your take on it is the empathy that you feel for government, because journalists' role is to demand more always, right? And I guess that's what we're trying to figure out. Where is the line? And here's something interesting about Ken. He worked very closely with Finance Secretary Cesar Purisima. He also worked very closely with now NEDA Secretary Carl Chua, and he did the transition with Finance Secretary Dominguez. Personalities, politics, and I guess that's part of where journalists will say, what role does politics play in all of this, and why can't that be pushed aside given the kinds of emergency powers that have already been given?
Sorry, the question. Sorry, the connection kind of broke off.
So, what role does politics play in something like this?
Yeah, I think the big political leaders really make the important strategic decisions. They do the frameworks for whether, say for example, the enhanced community quarantine can be lifted. They choose which advisors to listen to. And that's, I think, a critical component of what an effective political leader should have. It's the ability to ask questions and to know who to listen to. And I think what politics does is it deters services while removing some of the constraints from within bureaucracy. The politicians have the power to appoint, the fire, the basically form the team. And I think at this time, that's why I still feel very deeply about working with government, despite the personalities and the politics involved. It's because all of us are serving the Filipino people. And it's critical that for all of us, regardless of our political affiliations, to come together and try to work the best way we can
So
together.
you actually broke up right at the point when you said what politics does is. Could I just ask you to repeat that?
Oh yeah, sure. So what politics does is it determines the speed of the delivery of social services, because part of what politicians can do is to appoint the right people, hire, fire, promote, and the ability to listen, the ability to select which advisors to listen to, and it's particularly important for them to listen not only to the people they agree with, but the people they disagree with. I was talking to some of the ex-staffers in the finance department, and they were telling me that their top bosses were basically telling them listening should be on overdrive in a time of crisis. And I think yeah, that's the reason why I still continue to try to support and give feedback that as constructive as possible, so that so that there can be actions taken to improve some of their processes.
Given the numbers that you have right now, where do you see this headed? Best and worst case.
Yeah. So the worst case is we continue on this path, right? That we continue to disburse very slowly. We do not get the appropriate staff work necessary to allay the fears of social welfare employees and local government officials, and people go hungry, and I think that's terrible, because people are already hungry. That's the worst case scenario. The best case is if, for example, the Department of Social Welfare and Development continues on the path of improving their operations center, because I know for a fact that they're already trying to build and resolve some of these different issues that we raised, and we all have the ability to monitor the budget. So they continue on this path of pay now, verify later, and the social amelioration is disbursed. And another track that is interesting and a variation of that would be, since I'm not an epidemiologist, I really don't have an opinion on this, but it's also a question in my mind, when is the right time to lift the quarantine? Because social ameliorations are there, right? As you said, to
Right.
give time for our to stop hunger, but also to make sure that that our health system is ready. So is our health system ready for this gradual lifting? Is a question that I think epidemiologists can answer better, but it's a question on my mind as well.
Let me ask you for advice. And advice here is, there is a line between constructive criticism, and then as a journalist, our job is also accountability. And the reason why we do go for accountability is the hope that things will change for the better, right? Because when you know where things falter, where things bottleneck, then you can push government, because government has tremendous power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then once you figure that out, then you can change for the better. In different instances, the governments that you all served in looked at Rappler as a they're both not very good at criticism. I mean, at accepting criticism, because there was a point even in the Aquino administration where Rappler wasn't allowed, and certainly in the Duterte administration, what's happened to us. This is still our job. Given that we need to hold government to account so it can change for the better. What advice would you give?
Honestly, continue doing what you're doing. I have deep respect for the journalists at Rappler, and I do think that journalism serves a critical role in making sure even the unpopular things are said, and that's important, right? But at the same time, it's important too to f- to to nuance the points related to implementation capacities of government, whether or not officials still sleep. And I think that that nuance is something that is like appreciated by many government employees who look at the work of Rappler and say, hey, there's a problem here. I think there's a way to solve this. Because there are many people, and I've worked with so many career officials who've looked at the works of journalists that have sparked change. And they might be quiet, but they're there. So that's the hope I have. Like I have deep trust, for example, in the career officials of the finance department, which I served, the people in the House and Senate, especially the career officials who have been there for decades, whom I had the honor of staffing with in the House and the Senate. So the people are there, and please continue what you're doing. It's certainly better. It holds power to account, like our link, the link to our budget tracker.
And this is one of the things I like about the budget tracker, but the budget tracker works very slowly still, right? Um,
Mhm.
you know, so here we are, cynic and optimist. Well, I hope to be constructive, right? That's still the end goal. I've heard you also talk about the what happens when key members of the staff or political appointees are changed. How important is that? And I guess part of our job as journalists is also to point out competency, the adequate, whether it is an adequate strategic or tactical response.
Uh-huh. So something I've learned in my grad school program on public administration is like state capacity is something that defines the delivery of public services, right? Whether there are enough schools, ports, roads, uh, basically anything that relates to public service delivery. And my reflections on government capacity in the Philippines is that it's not only the individual competence of a public servant that defines state capacity, it is the network of relationships that career officials have built for the longest time. So it's important, for example, for political appointees to respect the to respect career officials and the relationships that they've formed. Because as soon as, for example, uh, as soon as like a key official is removed without due process, uh, what it does is it messes up this entire system of delivery. So sometimes that can work for if you want to really shake up the bureaucracy. But what I've learned over my time in the DOF is like you try to work with the career officials as much as possible.
Your last thoughts, Ken.
Um, so really really thankful for being able to represent our 50 plus volunteers here, and there are many people who still want to continue to serve the public even in this time. Let's find those people and support them. For me, the place that I found in this coronavirus pandemic is to try to track the budget and make sure uh, that those numbers are clearly reported. But there are many other roles now that need to be filled, both in government and civil society, and even in journalism. And the pandemic is really a crucial point for the Filipino people to push that Bayanihan spirit forward. And if that means uh, doing criticism of the government, there's certainly space for it.
If people want to help you, Ken, where do they go?
So please go to bit.ly/ hold power to account. We have a tab there called data. We're trying to look for more social amelioration program data, and we're trying to gather all of that information. If you can work with local governments to try to speed up the delivery of social services, and please do continue to try to help from home.
Fantastic. That's Ken Abante. He's a researcher with Ateneo de Manila. He is working on this project that requires our help. Let's join in. Ken, thank you so much for your thoughts and keep working.
Thank you. Yeah, well, our 50 volunteers.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.